Today, I want to tell you a story. It's a crazy story. It's outrageous. Today's video will be longer than most of the videos that I normally post, but I beg you to stay with me until the end because this story that I'm going to tell you from the scriptures impacted me a couple months ago in a way that doesn't happen all the time, and I even shared it with a small group in a meeting that we had, and everybody seemed greatly impacted by it, and so I want to share it with you today. Like I said, I'm going to tell the story first. I'm only going to be reading little sections of scriptures because if I actually read through the whole thing, it's too long. It covers chapters 19 through 21 in the book of Judges. Now, let me give you some background about the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, we see this constant cycle of a bunch of ugliness. It's this time in Israel where there's no king, but God would appoint certain people to judge the people, which means to lead them, to issue judgments upon them when necessary, and to do what they needed to do as a leader over the people of Israel. Some of these judges are famous, like Deborah or Gideon, or probably Samson, the most famous. But there's these wild ups and downs, constant ugliness in the book of Judges because the Israelites, including the judges sometimes, would not do the will of God. They wouldn't do good in His eyes. They would do what was evil. And you'll see this, a few phrases come up multiple times throughout the book of Judges. One of them is the Israelites did what was evil in the Lord's sight. That's stated multiple times throughout the book. Another one is, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever was right in his own eyes. Okay? And that's a huge one, and that's one of the big takeaways from this story. Now, part of the reason I'm telling this story is because it's just wild. It is crazy. It's one of the most outrageous stories in the Bible when it comes to the things that the people were doing and just how crazy and terrible they were. So I want you to stick with me. Like I said, it might take a while, but we're going to get through it. And at the end, the reason this was such a big impact for me is because as I read through this, it brought me a lot of, it reminded me a lot of things going on in our country right now and just how off our country is. And then it made me look even internally in my own life and see where if I'm kind of doing similar things to what Israel was doing in this time. Not necessarily the same sins, but, well, you'll see once we get there. I want you to be on the lookout for that. So I had heard this story years back in a sermon, and the sermon was crazy. And at the time, I was like, man, I never heard this story. And then earlier this year, just a couple months ago, I was actually going through in my own study through the book of Judges. And yeah, it really hit me hard. And I think it's worth sharing. So here we go. Judges chapter 19, okay? It says, in those days when there was no king in Israel, a Levite living in a remote part of the hill country of Ephraim acquired a woman from Bethlehem in Judah as his concubine. But she was unfaithful to him and left him for her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah. Okay, like I said, I'm only going to read pieces of this. You have a Levite man. His concubine, which is like this lesser wife, leaves him, right? She's unfaithful to him, and then she leaves him, goes back to her own father's home. After 4 months, he decides to go after her, okay? And he's going to come to her in the scriptures say in a nice way and try to convince her to go back with him. Now, he travels across from where he's from in the outskirts of in the land of Ephraim, and goes to Bethlehem where she is with her father. As he arrives, her father welcomes him with open arms. And they have this whole 3-day stay, which was typical of the time to just have this big time outlandish hospitality and really house the people for a while. On the 4th day, whenever it's time to leave, the Levite man says, okay, it's time to go. But the father of the concubine says, no, stay, get your energy, wait and eat, and wait till after we eat. So they stay till the afternoon. And then it's kind of too late to leave, so they stay an extra night. The next day, the father of the concubine tries to do the same thing and keep him there even longer. But eventually, toward the end of that day, in the afternoon, the Levite man says, no, we got to get out of here. Me, my concubine, and his servant that he had taken with him, let's get out of here. And they start making their way back to Ephraim, where they're from. Now, they get up and they go. And they're not too far on their journey when it's getting close to nightfall already. And they're near a city called Jebus. Now this is actually Jerusalem, okay? But at the time it was not occupied by the Israelites. It was occupied by the Jebusites. Now this is in the promised land area of Canaan where God had told the Israelites to take over under Joshua's leadership. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So his servant says, hey, it's getting late. Maybe we should stay here in Jebus for the night, or Jebus, I'm not even sure how you say that. Maybe we should stay here for the night before we go home. But the Levite man says, no, this city is not occupied by Israelites. Let's go on to Gibeah, where that is an Israelite occupied city. We'll be more comfortable there. It's better there. So they continue about another 6 miles or so until they get to Gibeah, and they go into the town square. But no one took them in. Now, at the time, the custom was whenever there were outsiders coming into the city, the custom among the Israelite people was supposed to be that you house them somehow. You take them in, you're hospitable, and you care for them. So they're in the town square, nobody's coming out, and so they're waiting there, and they're just going to stay there for the night in the town square, which should have been fine also. But eventually, an Israelite man who lived in the city comes in from working, and he happens to be from the land of Ephraim also. And he decides to house them. Now, the Levite man tells him, well, we don't really need anything. We have enough hay for all our animals. We got some food and some drink for the night. We're okay. We'll just stay here. But in verse 20 of chapter 19, this man replies, peace to you, said the old man. I'll take care of everything you need, only don't spend the night in the square. So he brought them to the house and fed the donkeys. They washed their feet and ate and drank while they were enjoying themselves. This is where the story just turns, okay? While they were enjoying themselves, all of a sudden, perverted men of the city surrounded the house and beat on the door. They said to the old man who was the owner of the house, bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him. The owner of the house went out and said to them, no, don't do this evil, my brothers. After all, this man came into my house. Don't do this horrible thing. Here, let me bring out my virgin daughter and the man's concubine now. Use them and do whatever you want with them, but don't do this horrible thing to this man. But the men would not listen to him, so the man, the Levite man, seized his concubine and took her outside to them. They raped her and abused her all night until morning. At daybreak, they let her go. Early that morning, the woman made her way back, and as it was getting light, she collapsed at the doorway of the man's house where her master was. I told you this story was crazy. That's already crazy. Believe it or not, it gets worse. You have to stay with me, okay? So far, they were basically berated in the house and demanded that the Levite man be given over to them, so that they could have sex with them, these men from the city. But instead, the Levite man gave him his concubine. They completely abused her in every way, and she comes back basically half dead, right? Now, it says, when her master got up in the morning, opened the doors of the house, and went out to leave on his journey. So he's ready to go home. There was the woman, his concubine, collapsed near the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. Get up, he told her, let's go. But there was no response. So the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he entered his house, listen to how crazy this is getting. When he entered his house, he picked up a knife, took hold of his concubine, cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and then sent her throughout the territory of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, nothing like this has ever happened or has been since the day the Israelites came out of the land of Egypt to this day. Think it over, discuss it, and speak up. So the Levite man sent body parts of his concubine out around the tribes of Israel to rile them up and to tell them about this great tragedy that had happened, this enormous injustice. And it worked. They riled them up. Chapter 20 says, all the Israelites from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead came out, and the community assembled in one body before the Lord at Mizpah. Now Mizpah was on the boundary line between Ephraim and Benjamin. The land of Benjamin is where the city of Gibeah was, where this horrible thing had happened. The leaders of all the people and of all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 armed foot soldiers. So this is a massive gathering of the people of Israel. The Israelites asked, tell us, how did this outrage occur? Okay, I'm in chapter 20, verse 4. Listen to what he says. The Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, answered, I went to Gibeah in Benjamin with my concubine to spend the night. Citizens of Gibeah ganged up on me and surrounded the house at night. They intended to kill me, but they raped my concubine and she died. Then I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout Israel's territory because they committed a horrible shame in Israel. Look, all of you are Israelites. Give your judgment and verdict here and now. I'm going to come back to what the Levite man said and how his version of the story is a little bit lacking. So Israel's all gathered. He tells them what happened, sort of, and this riles everybody up. Okay, the tribes of Israel decide this injustice has to be made right. So they decide they're gonna put the people who did this in that city of Gibeah to justice. So they send people into the area of to the land of Benjamin to ask around and say, give us these men who did this so that we can put them to death. Now, for some reason in the land of Benjamin, the Israelites there, they don't turn the men over. They don't comply with this. So then the story kicks up even another notch. Now there's going to be a war because these tribes of Israel, except for Benjamin, right? This is the one tribe that's separate right now. These tribes of Israel have decided, okay, tribe of Benjamin, if you're not going to turn over the men so they can be put to justice, then we're going to war. And now you're in on this sin now, and we're going to bring justice upon all of the tribe of Benjamin. So now think of this, you have a civil war now breaking out, okay? Remember, I told you this story's crazy, and it just kind of keeps going further and further. So in chapter 20, you have the description of this war, okay, this battle. The tribes of Israel, aside from Benjamin, go against Benjamin, and they send this army, and it takes 3 days. The first day, they send part of their army to battle the men of Benjamin, which is an army of about 27,000 people, and they're unsuccessful. Benjamin, even though they have the smaller army, actually fights them off and kills a bunch of the other Israelites. Then they try again the second day, and each time they ask the Lord, like, should we go? And he tells them yes, and they go. And a bunch of them get killed. They ask him again the second day, should we go again? He says, yes, go. And they go and they fight again, and a bunch of them get killed again. And then they ask again, Lord, should we go again for a third day? And the Lord says, yes, and this time I'm going to hand them over to you. And sure enough, on the third day, they set up an ambush and they completely demolish the Benjaminite army, along with those people from Gibeah. Now, toward the end of chapter 24, it says, all the Benjaminites who died that day were 25,000 armed men. All were warriors. But 600 men escaped into the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon and stayed there 4 months. Okay. So this battle, they've completely wiped out this area. They've completely killed a bunch of people in these cities. And there's only these 600 surviving men from the tribe of Benjamin. This is horrible. This is God's chosen people who have now had basically a civil war within themselves and almost completely killed off one of the tribes. Now when we get to chapter 21, things continue to get crazier. Chapter 21 says, the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah, none of us will give his daughter to a Benjaminite in marriage. So when they had that gathering at Mizpah, they had all agreed Benjamin is in the wrong here. They're not turning over these people who did these crazy things. We're cutting them off, we're going to war, and we won't give our daughters to any of them, right? But then there's also this heart of sadness because now Israel is broken, right? The tribes are not united. And so they say, why, Lord God of Israel, has it occurred that one tribe is missing in Israel today, right? They still want that tribe to go on. They don't want the tribe to die out. So look what it says. But they had taken this oath. We can't give our daughters in marriage. But the Israelites had compassion, okay, on their brothers, the Benjaminites, and said, today a tribe has been cut off from Israel. What should we do about wives for the survivors? We've sworn to the Lord not to give them any of our daughters as wives. Okay, so they still want the tribe to survive, so they need women. But we can't give them our women because we made an oath before the Lord that we're not going to give our daughters to that terrible tribe, who's letting this injustice stand. So what do we do? And the story just gets crazier. They decide, okay, who wasn't at the gathering, the big gathering at Mizpah? Was there any city that didn't come and send people? And they realized, oh wait, the city of Jabesh Gilead, they didn't send anybody. And there had been a decision that anybody who didn't gather with Israel would be put to death. But it's kind of funny, it doesn't seem that they're doing this out of justice and keeping that oath. They're doing this out of necessity to try and still help the Benjaminites. And so they decide, oh, here's what we can do. we can go wipe out everybody in Jabesh Gilead, except the adult women who are still virgins and have not been married. We'll give them to the surviving men from Benjamin. Yeah, great idea, right? These are leaders of Israel deciding this. So they go. They wipe out the city of Jabesh Gilead. They kill all the children. They kill all the men. They only leave alive the women who are of age, but who are still virgins, have never been married. And they take those 400 women and give them over to the survivors. Remember, there were 600 men who survived from the tribe of Benjamin. And so now there's still another problem. It's not enough women, right? There's still 200 more men who don't have wives. What can we do? So then they make another plan, another decision here. They say, okay, look, we'll send word to the Benjaminites. Look, there's an annual festival to the Lord at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Lebonah. Then they commanded the Benjaminites, go and hide in the vineyards, watch, and when you see the young women of Shiloh come out to perform the dances, each of you leave the vineyards and catch a wife for yourself from the young women of Shiloh, and take them back to the land of Benjamin. So this is the plan. Tell the Benjaminites where to come to this festival in secret, and whenever the women are out dancing in the night, which was part of the festival, just go out and grab yourself some of those women. Now, look, when the fathers or the brothers come to us and protest, we will tell them, show favor to them, since we did not get enough wives for each of them in the battle. You didn't actually give the women over to them, so you're not guilty of breaking your oath. So this was their solution. Tell the Benjaminites, come steal wives for yourselves, and then tell the men of Israel who were going to be upset, their fathers and their brothers, tell them, oh, no, you're fine, you're not in the wrong, you didn't actually give them over, they were stolen, so it's fine, we're okay, And just let them have them because they still need wives and we didn't provide them with enough wives. This is where the story ends, okay? And this is the end of the book of Judges. And the very last verse comes back to one of those phrases that I told you was repeated throughout the book. The very last verse in the book of Judges says, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever he wanted. Or some translations say, everyone did whatever was right in his own eyes. Now, that's a crazy story. But what stood out to me so much is that it highlighted just how much Israel had gotten off from the ways of God, from the things of God, and from everything he commanded them to do and everything he commanded them to be. Everything was just off, and it was wrong on top of wrong and on top of wrong. And even when the leaders of Israel were trying to fix a problem, they weren't really addressing the real problem. They were just putting a Band-Aid on top of it. And it was another wrong, another wrong, another wrong. And the story keeps escalating because there was no true king. The true king of Israel should have been the Lord, of course. This is before the time of King Saul. Should have been the Lord. But I think that verse and that phrase is repeated throughout the book of Judges to emphasize that the people were not following the one true king, which is the Lord. Okay, they weren't following him. So there was no king, and everyone just did what was right in their own eyes. Now, a couple things to notice in this story. None of these people were named, okay? And scholars believe that when that's done in the Bible, it's to not put a focus on these specific people. This is supposed to be indicative of the way things just were at that time. Like, these are the types of horrendous things that were going on. They don't name them specifically because it wasn't just those people that were this way. It was in general. Israel was this way. When I read this story, I thought of our country. I look around our nation, and I'm sure many other believers would agree, things just seem out of hand. The level of sin and complete lack of care for the things of the Lord is crazy these days. And sometimes I look around and say, man, we are so far gone. How did we get this far? How can we fix it? What can be done? And though there's a lot of different ways you could look into that and make a bunch of specific suggestions, I think the ultimate solution is Jesus. We need to turn to Jesus. We need to turn to the one true king. We need a king. People need the king. And without him, those problems will just persist and persist and persist. And all of the little solutions that even our governmental leaders or corporations who are trying to meet needs of people, all these little things are just Band-Aids, and often there's still things that are wrong. And they're just trying to they're trying to cover up a wrong with another wrong. and call it a good thing. And it's not. Tons of things going on in our world right now, tons of solutions and tons of attempts at solving problems are problems in and of themselves. And the idea that a different leader can save us or can help us and can fix things, it's just not true. We need to return to the King. Now, after I thought about that, it really hurt me, and I prayed for our country, and I hope you also do and continue to do that. But then I started thinking about it in my own life, because one of the things that stood out in the story to me was how many wrong, sinful things were just stacked up on top of each other. And I made a list, and I might have missed some, but I looked through that story that I just told, and there were like 12 levels of wrong. Okay, first of all, this Levite had a concubine, right, which is already outside of God's design for marriage, for being one flesh. You know, this one couple, a man and a woman, boom, one flesh. He had a lower wife, right, which was already something that should be an issue. Second, that concubine was unfaithful. So there's another sin, right? Now, unfaithful is a kind of a general term that it could have meant like sexually, but it could also mean some other things. But either way, she was unfaithful and she deserted him, right? So there's another thing that shouldn't happen in a marriage pact. The third thing is when they're leaving Bethlehem to go back to their homeland area, they stop in the city of Jebus, and the Levite man says, no, we shouldn't stay here because this is not Israelite city. Now, that's already an issue because this is within the area of the promised land that was given to the Israelites and that God had commanded them to drive everyone out of. So there were cities that they hadn't driven everybody out of. There were still cities that belonged to people who were not God's people, not the Israelites, still occupying that territory. And of course, that led to the mixing of cultures and I'm not talking about the mixing of ethnicities or something like that. That's totally fine. But it led to the mixing of religions, right? And pagan practices that infiltrated God's people and took their eyes off of the Lord. So there's another wrong. The fact that there was this city, that's Jerusalem actually, but it was being occupied by Jebusites that were never driven out. So there's another thing. Fourth, when they get to the town square in Gibeah, nobody comes out and is hospitable to them, which was one of the commands for those people, for the Israelite people in that time. So there's another wrong. And we heard the old man say, don't spend the night in the square. I think he kind of knew bad stuff goes down here in this city. And of course, it came to their doorstep anyway. Number 5, obviously the perverted men of the city who were acting out in homosexuality and wanting to have sex with the Levite man. So there's another one. Then right after that, the old man is very quick to offer his virgin daughter. That's terrible too. Take my daughter instead. Don't do anything to my visitor, but take my daughter and do whatever you want with her. And his concubine, go for it. So of course they offer the virgin daughter and the concubine. They end up only giving over the concubine. But there's another crazy, obviously offensive thing in the eyes of the Lord. Then obviously the rape and abuse of the concubine. Okay. Then number 8, when he takes her home, he cuts up her body. Okay. Now, yes, she died. Terrible, but that was actually a mistreatment of the body according to the old covenant teachings for the Israelite people. And of course, he's doing it in the name of like justice, and I'm going to rile up Israel or whatever. But still, he shouldn't. That wasn't how they were supposed to treat bodies. When he comes before the big gathering of Israel, if you notice in his story, he doesn't tell the whole story. He says they were trying to kill me, which that was never said, right? They wanted to have sex with him, but then they raped and they killed my concubine. Now he never told them the part where he gave her over to them. He left that out. So there's this like shadiness even in his story to call for justice. There's shadiness in that. Then they give Benjamin a chance to turn over these men, and Benjamin lets it stand. Benjamin's not going to take care of the problem. Benjamin's not going to turn over the men who did this terrible thing. So there's another sin. Number 11. What am I up to? Yeah, number 11. Whenever they found out that Jabesh Gilead, when they realized, hey, this one city didn't participate, they use that city as an excuse, right? Or they use this oath they had made as an excuse to really put another band-aid on this other issue of the Benjaminite survivors not having wives. And so they go and they kill everybody in that city, and that's another terrible thing. Then number 12, whenever they say, hey, Benjaminites, you guys come steal our women from this festival so that we can have a clean conscience because we didn't really give them over, but you're totally giving them over. You know what I mean? It's dumb. And it's silly and it's sad because now these women are being taken against their will into these marriages. And even there's even a little thing here. They actually gave directions to Shiloh for all the people and for the Benjaminites, which shows that the Benjaminites hadn't been observing the 3 annual festivals that they were supposed to at Shiloh. So there's just wrong on top of wrong on top of wrong in this story. And here's where I think it should apply in our lives. Sometimes we have issues in our lives, and we want to address them in ways that are completely ungodly because we're not acknowledging that the issue itself is already ungodly. You know, there are things that will come up. For example, maybe your marriage is kind of strained right now. Maybe there's a lot of fighting. And the solution, rather than taking it before the Lord and asking Him, Lord, work in our hearts, in the heart of me and my spouse, show us whatever our issues are that we're bringing into this relationship. Why are we always fighting? Why are we always angry? What's at the bottom of this? What's going on? Why are we so discontent with life instead of being grateful daily for everything that you are to us? Instead of attacking it like that, it's, oh, we need date nights more often. Yeah, that'll fix things. Let's once a week. Friday nights, that's date night, you know? And I'm not saying there's something bad about date nights. I'm not saying that. But it doesn't address the real underlying issues, okay? And so maybe you do better for a while. Maybe, hey, it was nice going out together and spending time and we ate and it was great and we went to a movie or whatever. And maybe that, but it's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid and there's never going to be ultimate satisfaction in that because the real issues aren't getting addressed. Just like the leaders of Israel were making these crazy decisions to wipe out a city, one of their own cities, to provide wives for these other guys who, it was this ugly, put a Band-Aid here, no, put a Band-Aid here, no, now do this, and it was all reactive and none of it was holy. You might have issues with your children. Maybe your children are getting out of hand if you're a parent. And rather than look at, man, what's going on with my kid? What's going on? Why are they so rebellious? Why are they so this? Why? This is a spiritual issue. I need to pray for them more. I need to talk to them more, get to the bottom of it. Rather than do that, we'd rather say, you know what? Man, they're maybe they just need their space. Yeah, maybe I'll just give them a little more freedom. Maybe and it's a Band-Aid. You're not addressing any of the deep issues. You're using an ungodly approach to handle a problem of ungodliness. And it's never going to fix. Maybe there are issues at work. Maybe you've even stepped into some kinds of situations where things are wrong, but because you've already let things go to a certain point, you feel like, well, I can't fix it now, and now I just have to participate in this. And again, you're not actually addressing the core issue. Maybe there's a direct and individual and specific sin for you particularly that you struggle with, it's a sin, and rather than get to the heart of, God, why do I struggle so much with this temptation? Or maybe you're not struggling, maybe you're just giving yourself over to it. But rather than addressing, why is this an issue for me? What's going on, Lord? Help me through this. You'll put a Band-Aid on it and try to kind of come at it a different way and kind of fix it a little. Or sometimes the Band-Aid that people use, and this is so sad, sometimes the Band-Aid that people will use to fight a sin in their lives is to just decide that it's not a sin. Oh, well, I think it's fine actually because, and they'll have some kind of justification for it. And this is terrible, and I think it hurts the heart of God to see His people doing things like that. So take a look at your life. This is the takeaway for today. I know this was a long video. Those stories, and you can go read it. This is Judges chapters 19 through the end of Judges. As I read it, like I said, I thought of our country, but then I thought, man, look at us as individuals And we need to look at where we're putting band-aids on our lives and where we're stacking wrong on top of wrong on top of wrong on top of wrong, because we're not actually addressing some of the core things that might be going on in our hearts, that are displeasing to the Lord, where we've already gotten off track, and rather than correcting and getting back on track, we just want to put a band-aid on it and say it's okay. So I encourage you, get alone with the Lord and pray about this and start asking him, because maybe you noticed some of the issues, but you haven't really taken steps to address them. Or maybe you're not aware and you need to ask God, show me some of these things. Show me if there are these issues in my life where I've been stacking wrong on wrong on wrong, because I haven't been coming at him from a place of holiness and wanting to actually do things right in your eyes. Remember, we have a king, one true king, and we should not be doing whatever we want, right? We should not be what the book of Judges describes, where it says there was no king in Israel and everyone just did what was right in their own eyes. That should not be our story. We should be doing things that are pleasing to the Lord and honoring to him, and things that bring a wonderful testimony to Christ if we carry that label of a Christian. So I encourage you, get alone with the Lord, talk to him about these things, pray fervently about it, and see what changes you may need to do and changes you may need to make in your life. Not so that you can feel better about yourself or anything like that, but so that you can just know that you're delighting him with the way that you live. That should be a constant goal of ours every day. We know it's our purpose to glorify him in everything. So I hope that helps you. I hope that blesses you. Have a wonderful day, and let's take over. Let's put the king in his place, and let's submit to him and not do right in our own eyes. God bless you.